continues. The power issues that have held Nigeria down for decades and practically wiped out her productive capacities recently reared up their ugly heads when the so-called national grid collapsed for a 22nd time in 2022. As if that wasn't enough, long queues of motorists resurfaced at petrol stations at the major cities sometime last week, ushering in another period of frustration for the citizens and the inevitable loss of man-hours as usual. Analysts say for as long as Nigeria continues to suffer from insufficient supply of electricity and incessant fuel disruptions, any chance of attaining greatness would always prove elusive. Well, joining us now to look at this matter is, in relative detail, is Sam Aiboni, energy expert and partner at Victoria Chambers and fellow Global Academy of Finance and Management. It's good to have you with us.
It's good to be here.
All right. You're also a member of the Nigerian Gas Association of International Petroleum Negotiators. How would you assess recurring grid collapse in Nigeria and its economic impacts, given the fact that so much has been spent on infrastructure?
Well, I think the grid collapse is a symptom of a bigger problem. The energy sector we have, from the 70s, we have been doing between 3 and 5 megawatts. And when El-Rufai was in BP, there was a lot of promise with the privatization that will by now be doing 15 megawatts. But we have not delivered on the promise. Now, I think it's the intersection between politics and economics. That's where the problem lies. The attempt for various governments to try and provide, for a lack of a better phrase, subsidy in the power and the PMS sector is what translates to the grid. Because at the end of the day, it's a value chain. It's a value chain for we have 85% of our power coming from gas. So it comes from upstream, where the gas is produced, all the way to the customer. So the money goes in that direction, and the power goes in the other direction. So while gas powers the GENCOs supplies to the transmission lines.
We still have Sam Aiboni, partner Victoria Chambers, with us to discuss energy challenges as we have in the country. Earlier on, we were talking about the collapse of the grid, more or less, as it were, and the narratives behind it. And you were also making points regarding that. So I think we should take off from where you left off.
Okay, so the point I was making was that I think the collapse of the grid is just a symptom of a bigger problem. And I think it's where economics and politics meet. Now, like I was saying, there's a value chain from gas, generation, distribution to the customer. So that's how power is produced and gets to the customer. But the cash goes inversely. So you pay for your NEPA bill, you pay the distribution company, you pay the generation company, they pay the gas company. Now, when there's a distortion in that process flow of gas in either direction, either of power in one direction or gas in one direction, then there's a breakdown. And what governments have done successively is to try and manage the process. So they give discos money for metering. They pay the gas suppliers where the GENCOs are not able to meet up. When TCN is not able to commercially run its infrastructure, they provide funding for it. So as a business, even though we said we have privatized the business, we left only TCN for national strategic importance to government, even though we have somebody who will say we have appointed to manage it. And we're supposed to have like a regulator who is neck to regulate the point. But the truth about it is that the power industry is not being run like a business. Government is intervening and babysitting it. And until we fix it, you understand, until we fix it, it's not going to work. And I think we are getting into the electioneering circle. And I think these are the kind of discussions that we should be having. Each of the front-running candidates should be able to say, how do I intend to fix the underlying process? It's nice to visit Egypt to see what they have done in Egypt. But the truth about it is that there are some fundamental problems in Nigeria. We have installed capacity of over 12,000 megawatts. So it's not whether we don't have power plants. We have gas reserves in Nigeria. We have engineers in Nigeria. We have very brilliant regulators in NEC. But it's not for lack of not knowing where the financiers are. It's just that the government has not had the courage to say, this is a business, and let us, the obligations, everybody should live with his obligations. And I think that is that failure. And that's what shows up when the grid fails. And once the grid fails, like we do everything, they set up a committee, somebody visits Germany, they sign, they go to Federal Executive Council, and if the World Bank or Power Africa or some organization provides $200 million, $300 million to patch the process and just waiting till the next election cycle, because nobody wants to take that hard decision that needs to be taken.
Indeed, and following up, I'm glad you made that point regarding your last comment. Now, sometime during the era of the late President Erdogan, there was a clamor for a call, or rather to have a state of emergency be declared in the power sector. That was largely ignored. And then when his erstwhile deputy took over, what we had was a mere unbundling of NEPA into tiny bits, the discos, the gencos, and what have you. And then you would think at that point in time, what you actually said was there's still a lot of government intervention and the actual running of that sector. But why don't we have the scenarios like you have in the telecoms industry, whereby you have more players in the telecoms industry, whether it's Globalcom, whether it's MTN or Airtel, you have options, choices to go to. If you're not comfortable as a subscriber or as a consumer, you can go to another company. But what we have in NEPA, is still the old PACN, Gencos, and you don't have a choice. It's still the same set of establishment, but broken into tiny bits. So how do you run, a business like that profitably? And then we're hearing about the possibility of the tariffs being increased as well shortly. So in that scenario, do we have a true a sense of getting things done the right way in terms of, you know exactly where we're going?
Well, for me, I will approach the issue as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And because there are technical issues. And I think the technical issues, we have demonstrated capacity to address all these technical issues. We have been able to build 12 megawatts install capacity. So I think the technical issues are not there. We have been able to build power stations. We have been able to build grids and lines. I think we can assess finance because we know that we have 200 million people, and if the pricing is right, we'll be able to pay for it. So there are various contracts that are in the space. And I think the regulator, we need to put the regulator on the spot. Because what has happened is that nobody takes responsibility for his non-performance. And
but isn't that where the regulator comes in?
But I'll give you the point. So that's where the regulator comes in, and that's the point I'm saying. So I'll give you an example of the discos. The discos are the guys near the front because they're the ones that are supposed to collect money from the customers. And they have a series of issues. They're talking about metering, they're talking about the tariffs being increased, they're talking about thefts, they're talking about vandalization, they're talking about the representations that the government gave them at the time they acquired the asset. Now, as a regulator, if it was a bank, we know what happened in the banking industry. When the CBN thought that the banks were insolvent, at the time, we had a leader in Nigeria that declared the banks insolvent and sold the banks for ₦1. And nobody remembers today. That's where Crystal Bank was acquired, became Standard Trust Bank, went all the way to become UBA. And we have a more vibrant banking industry today. So for me, I don't see why that same thing cannot apply to the discos. Government still has interest in the discos. If the discos are not performing and I cannot meet their bills, then somebody should weigh the big stick, declare them insolvent, get new people to take over them, and see whether it gets it right. Because as long as you're doing intervention to assist with meters, assist with payment for power, and patching the system, it affects people further down the line. TCN is not getting paid. MBED cannot pay the GENCOs. GENCOs cannot pay the gas program. And
it's a vicious
So
cycle.
Yes.
I have to ask my question. What about those who subscribe to the idea that this power grid issues and the issues of alternative power supply, that they are deliberate acts because some people are profiting off of these inconveniences? What do you have to say to that?
I think I should say in the circumstance, because we are sitting down here and all having a discussion, and we all agree that something should be done, and we all seem to agree on what to be done. And if governments over the last 30 years cannot see through this maze and address the power issue, and I think power is the most important thing in our developmental process, because when you talk about small and medium and micro businesses, it's power they need. The barber, the welder, the mechanic. So power is what is going to move us to drive our GDP. When we say we're moving from a consumption to a production economy, it's power. Yeah. So the emergency, like you talked about, that emergency is absence. And if the emergency is absent, then the only conspiracy choice like yours might be the explanation. Because like our conspiracy choice that is the guys who are making money from the process, guys that are importing generators, guys that are selling diesel. So maybe there's a conspiracy to make sure that we don't have power, so that we have to rely on alternative power. So the grid goes down, petrol becomes scarce. You have to buy so somebody is making money from the inefficiency. So maybe it's that block, because really, why will NEC have issues of throwing the big stick against the discos? Why would they have trouble throwing the big stick against the GENCOs?
Very good question. And on that note, unfortunately, we've run out of time for it. Sam Aiboni, partner, Victoria Chambers, many thanks for your thoughts on recurring grid collapse. It's good to have you with us.